And feel free, if, like, while going through those slides, some of it might be new for people, some of it might be old, but if you have questions, you can interrupt me. I'm totally fine with that. I probably will not see the chat, but um, hopefully you can feel free to just interrupt
I
me.
can
And
I can help
Zach,
monitor the chat, Heather.
yeah,
So
and
if you want to type in questions in the chat, I can make sure they're addressed.
okay, perfect. All right. All right, so we'll go through these slides. So this is just a program overview of the Indiana Housing First program for 2024. There are some changes from previous awards last year, so we'll just go through those. So introduce everybody, we'll go through the program and then just what the next steps are. So the four people who received the Housing First program in 2024 were Aurora, Damien Center, HVAC of Indiana, and YWCA, Northeast Indiana. So congratulations, everybody. It was a really competitive round this time, so all of you did a really good job on your applications. All right, so Housing First is an approach to quickly connect individuals and families experiencing a housing crisis to permanent housing without preconditions and barriers to entry, such as sobriety, treatment, or service participation requirements. And supportive services are offered to maximize housing stability with Housing First and prevent returns to homelessness, as opposed to addressing like predetermined treatment goals prior to permanent housing entry. And then for this program, we also use critical time intervention, also known as CTI. There'll be more in-depth training offered throughout. A lot of you are already certified in CTI. If you're not, no worries. We will get you certified. And so it follows the CTI approach to providing assistance. This is an evidence-based practice that has been demonstrated to be effective at providing support to individuals with serious mental illness during a transition from sheltered or unsheltered homelessness to permanent housing. And really, the goal of CTI is to build long-lasting stability by developing a community support network and really expanding out those supports you have within the community and that are tailored to an individual's needs. The supports established are expected to last long after the financial assistance and the relationship with the case manager are terminated, because we want those to be strong connections within the community that will last beyond the program. And so this is also in the manual, but just a brief overview of CTI. There's 4 phases. So the first phase kind of is the pre-CTI phase. It really varies. This is when the case manager is going to begin building a relationship with the client and developing a client's understanding of what CTI is. Um, and then the case manager and client will also identify goals and develop the housing plan. And then phase 1, which will be 4 months long, this is when a case manager provides special support for the client. And also phase 1 is going to be the time when the client case manager are talking the most, communicating the most, because the case manager is going to want to make connections to the community and provide services to community providers and services. The client will meet with provider and start building community support network. This is going to be case manager will have to make frequent home visits and accompany client to appointments. And then phase 2, which will be the next 4 months, this is when the case manager evaluates operation of the support network, make any adjustments or changes as necessary. And you'll still meet with the client regularly, but not as frequently as you did in phase 1. And then phase 3 will be the next 4 months, and then beyond, if the client is going to be recertified for another 12 months, they're kind of just in an extended phase 3. So this is when the case manager is just monitoring the connections and community support network. They'll develop a plan with the client for long-term goals and begin to set that plan in motion, and then project ends support once community networks are safely in place. And so I'll go through some eligible program costs. So we kind of break it down into 3 separate sections. So rental assistance and associated housing costs, supportive services, and then administrative costs. So participants can receive rental assistance without receiving supportive services and vice versa. So if a participant is receiving rental assistance, declines supportive services, the recipient must still be offered on a monthly basis services throughout the term of the rental assistance. And then they're all must be served and offered on a harm reduction approach. Um, and then they must meet with their case manager at least monthly regardless of service participation. And again, it's rental payments are limited to 24 months per household per episode of housing crisis. All right, so rental assistance and other housing costs is 60%, a minimum of 60% of the grant was going towards eligible costs in the rental assistance category. So monthly payments would be first and last month's rent if required, utilities included in the rent, to 3 months of rental arrears, and those late fees if this payment is necessary for the household to obtain or maintain permanent housing. And those arrearages are included in the total number of months that the household is eligible to receive. It could also go towards rent for mobile homes or RVs. We don't see that often, but it is part of this rental assistance portion. And they must be paid to a third party on the participant's behalf. Must be paid one time a month. Prorated rents and arrears may be included with the first month's rent payments. Also, security deposits up to 2 months of rent value. Any amounts of the security deposit returned to the recipient should be granted to the participant at the end of the lease, so it's given to the recipient. And up to 3 months of utility arrears if this payment is necessary for the participant to obtain and maintain utilities for the assisted unit. Again, those are also included in the total months that the household is eligible to receive. Utility deposits and ongoing utility payments for households receiving rental assistance. This cost can only be covered if the participant is not receiving utility assistance from another source. So any required application fees or cost of background checks, one-time moving fees, the housing search, Inspire inspections, and calculating participant income, all of those would be under eligible program costs. And then now for the next section of the eligible program costs would be supportive services. Again, this is a maximum of 30% of the overall grant. And some supportive services, those would be like employment assistance, job training, substance abuse and addiction treatment, educational assistance, life skills assistance, treatment for mental or physical health, developing housing or service plans, transportation, assessment of service needs, legal services, childcare assistance, and housing stability case management services would all be examples of supportive services. And then again, costs for acquiring essential household items provided to the participant as a grant and not to exceed $250 per household without written permission from IHCDA. So we kind of leave this vague, the essential household items, because you want so could be like blankets, utensils, cleaning supplies, anything that's an essential household item. If it is more than $250, you can email me and we can get, I'll look at that and see if we can get permission to do more than $250 per household. And also developing plans, making referrals, or connecting to types of the services listed above. All right, and then the last little section for eligible program costs would be administrative costs, which is a maximum of 10% of the grant. So this would be processing claims, supervision of staff, reporting, Inspire inspections, housing search, mediation with property owners or landlords, determining participant eligibility, and any IHCDA approved training would also be included in that. All right, so for some ineligible program costs, so that would be any costs related to home ownership, so mortgage assistance, utility payments for homeowners, um, rent or utility assistance for households receiving another subsidy. So if they're already on another rental assistance subsidy, hotel or motel payments, cable or satellite services, monthly utility payments for households not receiving rental assistance, renter's insurance, unless it's included in the rent, furniture or any other household items that's costs more than $250 without specific written permission from us. And then any other costs not described in the manual without written permission from IHCDA as well. And if you're ever questioning if something's eligible or not eligible, feel free to email me and I can take a look at that for you. All right, so we'll talk about budget modifications. Everyone submitted a budget when they did their application. So you can also anytime submit a budget modification anytime during the grant term by completing a budget modification request form. This is found on our Housing First webpage, and then you can just email it to me and I can take a look at it. And most of the time they're approved as long as rental assistance is at least 60%, services cannot go above 30, and administrative costs cannot go above 10% of the overall budget. A budget modification is not required to adjust funds between line items within a budget category. So if the original budget is $3,000 in childcare costs and $15,000 in housing stability case management services, but childcare costs are you see as a lesser needs service, the recipient can submit claims for $18,000 in housing stability case management at their discretion. So, but if you're moving things from rental to supportive services administrative costs, that's when you'll need to fill out a budget modification form. And this is just an overview of what it looks like. This is found on our webpage. All of the forms will be there. Yep. So this is just where it's going to be located. All of those forms will be right here. The newest Housing First Program Manual, the 2024, that's what we'll be using going forward for all current programs. So. All right, and now participant eligibility in this program, it's going to be a two-part eligibility. So an eligible person is an individual with a serious mental illness, a chronic chemical addiction, or a serious and persistent mental illness with a co-occurring chronic chemical addiction resulting in a housing crisis. And eligible participants in this program are households in which at least one member is an eligible person as described above, and all members are experiencing a housing crisis. All right, so a housing crisis, how it's defined, it's a situation in which a household does not have sufficient resources or support networks immediately available to maintain safe and affordable housing or to prevent the individual or household from requiring emergency housing. So all of these would be considered a housing crisis. So if they're residing on the street or a place not meant for human habitation, residing in temporary housing, or if they're staying with family or friends on a temporary basis, facing immediate or imminent court-ordered eviction, in which case they're only eligible for a one-time arrears payment to prevent the eviction and prevent homelessness, but can receive ongoing services. exiting a residential treatment program within 30 days, living in an institute or other restrictive setting, could, and if they could, with stable housing and affordable housing, along with those community home-based supports, live independently in the community. So that's all of the things that would be described under a housing crisis. So the recipient must retain documentation from a knowledgeable third party verifying that one of the eligible diagnoses apply. So acceptable documentation for this would be a letter from a professional licensed diagnosis stating that the individual has a qualifying diagnosis, a referral letter, a prior diagnosis information processed by the participant. And if you're unsure of what would be included in documentation for this, just let us know. And self-certification, so any HMIS or intake assessment is not sufficient documentation to demonstrate eligibility. And a knowledgeable third party would be the Housing First program staff. So any questions on this? Right. And so the required documentation would be the IHCD Housing Crisis Verification Form. Again, that's found on our website. And then the third-party verification of a qualifying diagnosis. These not required documentation would be, you're not required to document the link between diagnosis and housing crisis, and you should not include any detailed medical records in the participant file. If this is the only documentation that is available, consider writing a letter summarizing the type of information used to determine the eligibility and retaining that documentation instead. Because when we will monitor this program, it will need to see proof of eligibility, but we will not want to receive medical records for clients. And now for income eligibility, initial eligibility is based solely on just it's a qualifying person experiencing a housing crisis. And there's no income qualification at initial enrollment, and you may not establish any minimum income requirements. But if to receive more than 12 months of rental assistance, the household must have an annual income that does not exceed 50% AMI, and recertification must occur at least annually. And then initial eligibility criteria holds if an eligible person with a qualifying diagnosis is still a member of the household and documentation of the diagnosis does not need to be retained or reobtained. The participant's annual income does not exceed 50% AMI as published by HUD. And then you must use the tenant income certification form, the TIC form, that will be on our website. And then the program participant does not have sufficient resources or support networks immediately available to maintain safe and affordable housing or to prevent the individual or household from requiring emergency assistance. If the recertification finds that the household income does exceed 50% AMI at recertification, but the household is otherwise eligible, then the household is not eligible for the additional 12 months of rental assistance, but they are eligible for an additional 12 months of supportive services. And if the household's income is reduced below 50% AMI following the annual certification, the household can receive rental assistance through the remainder of their term of assistance. So through the remainder of that 12 months. Households determined to be ineligible at any time may receive rental assistance for 1 month following ineligibility determination, and then supportive services for 3 months following that ineligibility determination. And then participant households will be determined to be ineligible for continuing participation in the program at recertification or at any time if the program participant has sufficient resources or support networks immediately available to maintain safe and affordable housing, and if the participant household no longer has at least one member with a serious and persistent mental illness and or chronic chemical addiction. All right, so now for participant selection plans, these were all submitted um, as well in your RFPs or RFQs. So recipients must develop a participant selection plan that describes the process for selecting program participants. And this plan must be developed and approved by IHCDA before participants are enrolled in the program. So plans must include all of the items listed in section 5.3 of the manual at minimum. So it has to include their definition of eligible participants in housing crisis, describe how eligible people who are medically vulnerable or either experiencing homelessness or immediately exiting a residential treatment program will be prioritized. Has to describe how eligible persons who are medically vulnerable and experiencing housing crisis otherwise will be prioritized. Identify any methods by which potential participants are identified and applied to the program. Describing the role of CE. Acknowledge that the program follows Fair Housing Act and have the equal housing opportunity and accessibility logos on this participant selection plan. And then all changes must be resubmitted to IHCDA for review prior to implementation. And IHCDA can verify that the plan is eligible and provide feedback. Recipients do not run the risk of enrolling ineligible clients. Recipients may propose a modification to the participant selection plan at any time. You just have to email that to me. And those type, sorry. Okay, sorry, I had a cough. So expansion or restriction of target population, and then updated referral sources or prioritization methods could be some revisions that you might want to include. All right, and so the length and termination of assistance, again, they can be enrolled for a maximum of 24 months per housing crisis. An enrollment is the receipt of rental assistance or other housing costs and supportive services. Participants who exit the program but experience a new and distinct housing crisis in the future can be enrolled again for a period not to exceed 24 months. And then assistance may be terminated to a participant for violating any program rules. So those would be established written standards and formal processes for terminating assistance, which will be told to the participant prior to termination. So you can see the manual, there's process for termination. Participants who are terminated from the program should not be prohibited from seeking services. And then termination should only occur in the most severe cases. So for lease and rental assistance payment contracts, again, everyone needs to have a lease. Participants receiving rental assistance must execute a lease. And then the exception would be participants receiving eviction prevention assistance only. The term must be at least 12 months and renewable, cannot be overly burdensome or impose any service provisions. Non-residents, co-signers are okay. You have to have the RAP contracts, the rental assistance payment contract, and there's 2 of them that you have to complete. Again, those are going to be on our website. So the 2 RAPs would be the contract between the recipient and the landlord, and then the contract between the recipient and the tenant. So both of those need to be completed. So the RAP between the recipient and landlord will be like security deposit return, rental obligations, should be Inspire. Fair housing requirements, lead-based paint, and then the contract between the recipient and the tenant. That would be the tenant's responsibilities and the length and termination of assistance. And then all of these should be in the tenant file. And yeah, and renewed when necessary, or and updated with renewed documentation. And those would be found right here. This is like a zip folder that has all of the information for that in those wrap sheets. All right, so then payment standard. The payment standard for this program is rent reasonableness. The contract rent charged by the landlord plus a utility allowance, if utilities are not included in the rent, must determine to be reasonable. And then the following factors are what's taken into consideration when determining rent reasonableness. So location and age of unit size, type of unit, the quality of the unit, including the quality of the original construction, maintenance, and improvements made, and then amenities, services, and utilities included in the rent. And then recipients should generally disprove any lease that is not reasonable. However, the recipient may approve a lease that is not reasonable if the participant agrees to pay the difference between the reasonableness determination and the contract rent plus tenant portion. And recipients are encouraged to develop policies around the approval of leases that are not reasonable. And then recipients must review and approve rent increases by landlords, renting to participants. So rent increases on renewals are allowed, but recipients should disprove any renewal if it is unreasonable. And then we use affordablehousing.com is IHCDA's preferred method for determining rent reasonableness. It's formerly Go Section 8. If you do not have access to affordable housing, don't worry, just email me and I can get you access to affordable housing at no charge. So just email me and anyone on your team if they need access to it. Just email me their name and their email address, and then I can do that. And then these rent reasonable determinations should be included in the client file. And then if you also need a document, or highly recommended to document the client's agreement to a lease that exceeds the reasonableness standard, if that's the case in that scenario. And then for calculation of rental subsidy, participants' income must be calculated at initial enrollment, recertification, and anytime there's a change in income to determine the participant's rent calculation. So we want to use that TIC form. The participant's rent contribution must be at least 30% of the household's monthly adjusted income, and income should be recalculated whenever there is a change in the household status. So if there's a change in the household size, or they have gained or lost employment, anything that would lead to an increase or decrease in income, you'll want to calculate the rental subsidy. And the program allows for flexibility in calculating the amount the participant will pay. So to prepare participants for the possibility of rent burden following program exit, recipients may require the participant to pay an amount above 30% of their income, so long as that it's based on a percentage of the household income, not a specific dollar amount, is reasonable for the household to pay and still meet all basic needs, is conducive to the recovery and long-term stability of the household, and takes into any consideration the utilities, medical costs, education, healthcare, childcare, or any other reasonable reoccurring fees that the household pays. And rental contributions may increase over time over the term of assistance as the participants' income increases or as their housing stability increases. Any changes should be reasonable and consider the participant's entire situation. So you want to look at the whole picture. If a participant's income decreases, their rental contribution may also decrease back, but to never be below 30% of their monthly adjusted income. And then the method used to calculate the participants' rental contribution may vary by household. The recipient may use its discretion and expertise to determine which subsidy model is the best fit for their household. So some of that, this will be in the manual, more information, but. And then some recommendations, just be upfront with the household about what will be expected of them over the term of their assistance. Use CTI to identify outside financial supports, and establish an initial period of assistance. And just make sure to document the rental subsidy structure used for each household and retain it in the client file. And if there's any deviation made, obviously just make a note. And then exceptions must be applied equitably to all participants. All right, so now more for preparing for the end of assistance. IHCDA has expanded its housing choice voucher limited preference for moving on vouchers to include participants in the Housing First program. So moving on is limited to 50 referrals from COC, PSH, and Housing First annually. Must be HCV eligible, and able to port into PHA jurisdiction. Must have reached the end of their Housing First eligibility. Recipient must demonstrate that all efforts were made to help the client be successful in Housing First, and that the client will not be able to remain housed without this resource. So this referral will include documentation demonstrating sincere and ongoing efforts to stabilize the client. You'll have to include your CTI plans, enrollment in mainstream benefits, connection to financial and other community supports where appropriate, plans to provide ongoing support during transition to moving on. Participants will likely have little to no income. And then recipient must additionally commit to supporting the participant through the transition to the moving on voucher, and referral must be sent to and approved by the supportive housing team. And I know that there was a pause on the moving on vouchers earlier. I don't know if Zach, did you figure out if that pause is unpaused?
No, I haven't, but I will try to find out before we're off the webinar.
Okay.
Hey, Heather, I have a question with that. Because there had been some confusion, I know, in our agency. You guys versus, I don't think I realized you guys received moving on vouchers initially, but also IHA has moving on vouchers. Those are two separate things. Is that right?
Correct. So these
Okay.
ones are the IHCDA issued moving on
Specific,
vouchers.
yeah. Because I think
Yeah.
when the pause came out, I think all of us were like, wait, what happened?
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, those would be
Yeah.
the IHCDA ones.
Just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
are IHA or Housing First clients eligible for IHA moving on vouchers?
I don't know.
Okay, I was just curious.
I
Yeah,
don't know about that, but yeah, I know I knew a lot more about because IHA, I had heard this has been a while ago, but that they had move on vouchers. So I didn't know you guys had. So when that pause came out, I was like, oh, I don't think I knew. You know what I mean? Like I got a little bit confused because I started associating the two together, but obviously they're separate.
yes, and
Okay,
when we are issuing vouchers, you
Uh-huh.
can, if IHA or if those clients are eligible for the IHA moving on, that's great. But you can refer them to IHCDA too, and we'll port them out to
Oh, nice.
IHA.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Zach. Thanks, guys.
Mhm. Right. And so for unit selection, housing choice must be emphasized to the greatest extent possible. They may be offered units that are owned by the recipient, governed by an MOU, etc., but they can't be required to live in any particular location and must be provided with other available options. Long-term affordability must be considered when assisting with the housing search. Rental assistance must be tenant-based, and then participants cannot be required to stay in their unit at the end of the lease term in order to continue receiving assistance. All right, and so we are also going to be adopting the Inspire quality standards and inspection protocol for this program. So this is different from what we've done in the past. So now we're using Inspire. So all recipients will be required to conduct Inspire inspections of the unit before allowing the beneficiary to move in, so the client to move in. For households receiving one-time security deposit assistance, a unit inspection is required only at the time of that assistance is provided. And recipients must utilize the Inspire HCV PVV inspection checklist, and that is linked here. It's also linked in the manual, so you can click on that to get the inspection checklist to determine whether the unit passes or fails Inspire standards. The recipient must retain a copy of the form in the participant file, and recipients may not perform Inspire inspections on units that they own or any units for which the recipient has a financial interest in it. If a participant chooses to rent a unit owned by the recipient should contact IHCDA. And then we will also provide any additional guidance to recipients on how to conduct Inspire inspections when needed. I know there is a Inspire inspection training already on our YouTube channel that Matt conducted. So I would watch that if you're unfamiliar of the differences with Inspire inspections, since I know that is new for some people. All right, and so for reporting, recipients are required to submit a monthly report to me, basically, at the 15th of each month. So this report should include information about the previous month. That the report will be the previous month's Housing First information. And that housing monthly report is found here on our website. And this is what it looks like. So you want to submit that to me on or before the 15th of each month. And just fill this out to the best of your ability about all the information for your Housing First clients from the previous month. All right, and so for claims, they are going to be submitted through IHCDA online. If you have not used IHCDA online before, we have information for new users, and all recipients are encouraged to review our online guide to refamiliarize themselves with the claims process. And if you have any questions about claims, you can always email our claims email directly, or if you have questions about creating a new account, adjusting any information in your account, or submitting claims, send that to claims@ihcda.in.gov. And then we can help you get set up and everything with the IHCDA online portal. So all the required claim documentation would be the signed claim receipt page that'll generate from IHCDA online, the claims summary page from IHCDA online, the supported documentation, so general ledger, invoices and receipts, the financial narrative reimbursement form. So that financial narrative will be also on the website. You'll see it highlighted there. So any questions about documentation, submission issues, goes to that claims email. And then if you have any other just questions in general about claims or any eligible expenses, or if you need to get approval for more than the $250 cost, just email me and I can take a look at that for you. And then this is what the narrative looks like. So that would just be included in the supported documentation when you're submitting the claims. So yeah, just make sure to fill out all that. Great. And so now HMIS, we do use HMIS. So it's a secure electronic data collection system used to determine the nature and extent of homelessness. Recipients are required to enter participant data upon intake and discharge from the program at a minimum. So the following data elements are required in the HMIS system. So it would be name, social security number, date of birth, race, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, disabling condition, residence prior to entry, zip code, length of stay at previous residence, housing move-in date, and exit destination. We may require that other data elements be collected at any point during the program, but for now, those are the required things that need to be entered at intake and discharge.
Heather,
Yeah.
hi, it's Jamie from Damien Center.
Mhm.
So Chip is our HMIS administrator. Will we need to work with them to get the program set up in the system? Or do you know if it's already in our system?
Yeah, let me, Zach, do you know if, I think they can just
Yeah.
use chips, right?
Yeah, you should just work with Chip to make sure that project is set up. It's fine to use Chip's HMIS. Well, since we don't have access to their system, we'll probably just ask you for like certain HMIS reports and stuff periodically. But that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And for balance of state grantees who are active in HMIS and have Housing First projects set up do not need to act at this time. If you are a new user and need to be set up, you can contact the HMIS help desk email. If you're active in HMIS but do not have active Housing First grants, you would set up a new project setup. And IACA will reach out once that project has been set up. Again, you can always email our HMIS help desk email. And so, yeah, I think everyone then would be, other than Damien Center, everyone's been set up using HMIS prior. So, but if you do have any questions, feel free to either email me, I can direct you to where you need to go. Yeah, so reach out to Chip's HMIS team to set up the Housing First project. All right, and so now record keeping. These are what need to be retained for any household served by Housing First program for at least 3 years following the end of their period of assistance. So the application, notice of program admittance and denial to applicants, eligibility determination documentation, so that housing crisis status and the eligible diagnosis, all income verification forms and documentation of method of rental calculation, the request for unit approval, rent reasonableness. You can just print that out from affordablehousing.com. Inspire inspection, lead-based paint report, leasing documents, and all CTI documents will need to be kept for at least 3 years following the end of the program assistance. And so for client feedback, we really do place value on the experience of the program participants and is committed to ensuring that there are avenues for incorporating client feedback into its program. So recipients are required to design participant feedback forms, which must be given to participants at the end of their term of assistance. So questions should be specific to the Housing First program and the option for to be anonymous if they need to be. And then we will ask for a copy of this form and information about how you have or plan to incorporate the feedback you receive from these client feedback forms. Reallocation policy. So at any point during the grant cycle, ICDA may require recipients who are behind on the benchmarks defined in their award agreements to provide a spend down plan for unclaimed funds remaining on their Housing First award. So this may result in additional technical assistance from ICDA, offer of an extension request or reallocation of funds. And that will also, just more information of that would be in the program manual. And then for closeout reports, at the end of the grant term, we will send closeout report that asks for these questions. So that'll be towards the end of the grant term. Just so we have information on like the total number of unique households, the households that exited the program, all those things. This is also will be included on the closeout reports. And then there are some narrative questions on the closeout reports. So we want you to be able to like describe your successful strategies for recruiting and retaining landlords, describe the services offered to program participants or any observed trends, describe your progress in incorporating feedback from the client, describe the primary challenges when administering the program, describe any specific program guidance that you need, that you think would assist our Housing First program, and then provide at least 3 client testimonies or success stories demonstrating the success of the program. Right. Any questions so far? I know we're at an hour, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. All right, so basically the next steps will be participant selection plans must be approved by IHCD before enrolling clients. So you can send those to me. I know if you've emailed me about your participant selection plan already, don't worry about it. We are working with that. And you'll know if it was approved or not. I'll email you that. So I think that's really all. If you ensure that you are set up in HMIS and the Housing First program project set up in there, any ongoing questions can be sent to me or Zach, obviously. So yeah, let me stop sharing. Okay. Anyone have questions on anything? I know I kind of went through that fast, but we will post this. I'll put this, post this, have them post it on our YouTube page so you can rewatch it. The Inspire trainings on there. But yeah, any questions? Zach, do you have anything you want to add?
I did find out about the moving on, so we are still paused on that. We aren't issuing any vouchers right now. IHCDA isn't, and we will be hopefully resuming that by the start of next year. If there are any existing like clients in any Housing First programs that are eligible for moving on, but can't be referred, if those households have an individual who is has a disability and is not elderly, so between the ages of 18 and 61, then we might be able to still issue them a voucher under the mainstream program because those are kind of separate pool of funds, so we can still issue those vouchers right now.
And we'll update you once we figure out when we're not on that pause. I can send out email to the Housing First like list that I have of all the emails. So yeah. Any questions? No. And again, if anything comes up while you're with specific weird client situations, if something comes up or you have any questions, feel free to email me or Zach. We'll be able to answer that for you. If not, we can give you guys back an hour of your time on a Friday. So
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Jamie,
right.
do you want to stay on and we can look at your participant selection plan
Sure,
if you have some time?
I do.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too.
Yeah, I think since you're like the new person this round, I think yours is the only participant selection plan we haven't like gone through completely yet. But
Yeah, I've looked at it. I know I've just had to type up my comments on it, but I was like, this is probably a lot easier just to go through it on the
Yeah.
call since we're already here.
Yeah, this is new to us, so I'm open to feedback.
Great. Okay, I'm trying to pull it up. Let me see if I can find it.
and then
Heather,
Sean, are you going to be working with Housing First clients then?
We kind of do things a little wonky here. So I'm in finance, and I'm the one who's going to submit all the claims, but I do adjudication or an audit of all claims before we submit them out. So I kind of just backup aid for Jamie, and then Jamie as the director will align whom will be in charge of the program.
Okay, perfect. So Jamie, if you just want to let me know what emails you need me to put either in affordable housing, or if you want them to be on like my Housing First listserv, because I think I just have you down. I don't know if like Alan wants to be in it, so
No, he won't.
Okay.
But I will email you our housing program managers who
Okay.
will be doing like the day-to-day
Okay.
overseeing of like the all the work we do with clients, and I just kind of oversee the program as a whole. So I'll
Okay.
send those to you, Heather.
Okay, yeah, and I'll just add them, so any Housing First communication that I'm sending to everybody, they'll be on that.
Heather, did you send me the PSP via email? I'm not on the VPN.
I don't think
I
so.
can
I
just get on the
think it's
VPN. I'll just freeze for a second, probably.
Yeah, I can email it to you though, because I think it's just in the shared drive, but I could email to you real quick.
It's okay. I'm almost on the VPN.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I always
It's
do that in
okay.
meetings. I don't get connected, and then I have to connect to it, and then it always freezes. No, it's not loading. Okay, actually, Heather, can you email to me? I'm having some kind of connection error.
Yeah, let me email it to you real quick.
It's saying our shared drive doesn't exist.
Oh,
I did have to like email or call IT this morning because my VPN wasn't working. So I don't know. Maybe there's something up with it. I'm like, I need to have access to the shared drive.
yeah, I just pulled it up. What I sent you. Let's see.
All right, I just sent it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So the comments I have on this are basically the same comments that we have on everybody's tenant selection
Yeah.
plan for the first time that